Sue, please welcome Sue Campbell. Over to you, Sue.
Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be here. And as you know, the Youth Sport Trust is a partner in this Congress, and I've been chair of the Youth Sport Trust now for 22 years, way too long, really. But I've been passionate my whole life about young people and young people's right to be active. And what I'd like to talk to you about for the next 30 minutes is really some of the big lessons I think all of us need to take on board if we're going to change the status quo. And we all know that it's getting more and more challenging to engage with young people, to keep them with us on the journey, and to sustain their activity into later life. And I think if we keep doing what we've always done, we're not going to get anything different. So my challenge is, are we prepared to think and act differently around our physical education in schools, around our school sport, and our physical activity offer to young people? So my first challenge to you this morning is to begin to ask yourself the question, how differently can we begin to work to attract young people into physical activity, physical education and sport? So you know, as I do, what the huge issues are for young people at this moment in society. And in our world, here in the United Kingdom, and I would suggest across much of Europe and the United States and Australia and New Zealand, the developed world, the issues are very similar. We have physical issues. So we have the whole business of this sedentary lifestyle, where young people are just naturally not as active. They spend between 6 and 8 hours in their bedrooms working on their digital devices. They don't play in the streets anymore because the streets aren't as safe as they used to be. And equally bombarded all the time by what they're meant to look like, what they're meant to be as young people. I don't even remember thinking about those issues when I was 10 and 11 and 12. Now, thanks to the old digital device, someone's telling me how I should look, someone's telling me what weight I should be, someone is consistently bombarding me with what physically I need to look like. They're not bombarding me with what physically I need to do to have an active and happy life. Secondly, in our societies, we're seeing a growth of emotional unwellness. So here in the UK, we're seeing a rise of young people self-harming, we're seeing a rise of young people contemplating suicide, we're seeing a rise of loneliness and isolation for young people. These are creating emotional traumas and emotional problems. Does being physically active help with those issues? Of course it does. Of course it does. So a lot of our emotional challenges begin by the fact that our young people are not interacting, not moving together, not playing together, not cooperating and competing together, not enjoying the very physical movement that all of you know is so important to a healthy lifestyle. And the third set of issues we're all facing are social issues. Isolation of young people. If you ask young people today how many friends they have, they'll tell you they've got 400. They're all on this thing. If you ask them when did they last speak to somebody, they have to think about it. If you ask them, are you nicer to people on this thing? Or when you're looking at them face to face? Looking at them face to face, I'm much nicer. On here, I say and behave quite badly. Why? Because there's no consequences. You don't see the immediate consequence of that comment you sent to somebody on your digital health device. So we're creating in our young people social isolation, emotional illness, and lack of physical activity. My argument with you this morning is that many of those issues have to be addressed by much wider and bigger policy issues than perhaps you or I can influence. But I am 100% certain, 100% certain, that if we give young people the right movement experience, the right introduction to physical activity, physical education and sport, we will counter many of those issues that young people are facing in our society today. So this right to move is not a nice to do thing. It's not something that's nice to do. It's something we need to do. It's something our policymakers need to help us do, and it's something all of us who care passionately about the future of young people in our society absolutely have to do. There is no choice for us if we're going to create a happier and healthier society. One of the things we did at the Youth Sport Trust was have a look with a future foundation into what was the child of 2035 going to look like. In 2015, the Youth Sport Trust was 20 years old, and we'd seen some massive changes in children's behaviour patterns and in the provision and in the policy that surrounds young people's physical education and sport. And we wanted to know, if that's the journey we've been on, what does it look like in 20 years' time? And we were confronted with a really simple report, and you can access this report if you want to, which simply says that the digital world will overtake our children, could result in isolated young people living in this virtual world with little contact with reality. Or we can be brave enough and bold enough to use the digital generation, to use the digital revolution, to drive people towards physical activity and to create a balanced life. How well are we using this digital world to drive young people to physical activity? I won't ask the question, but I bet most of you are wearing a gadget that tells you how many steps you're doing or what your activity levels are. Am I right or not? Most of you wearing one of these things? Yeah? Oh, only a few. How many of you have got one of those gadgets? Put your flipper up for me. That means your hand is on. Oh, not as many as I thought. What's the matter with the rest of you? Come on, what are you doing? You can't talk about movement, you have to do it. Pardon? Don't argue with the speaker. Okay, so there are four things I want to talk about. If that's the backdrop, what are the four things we need to do to advocate that young people have this right to move? So my first one is a simple one. We often think we think of movement as something separate. But my argument would be that movement is linked to other intelligences. Just think about it for a moment. Think about the children who start to play without adult interference. What do they start to do? They immediately unlock a creative mind that begins to create something that they want to play at. When adults come in, we often can remove that creativity because we're instructing, we're coaching, we're telling, we're teaching. So now I become responsive rather than creative. How well do we keep creativity alive in our children through the movement programs that we operate? How much do we impose the solution rather than ask the question? When we think about social movement, what do we know about movement? The moment I start to walk towards you, I'm creating an interaction with you. There's something happening. We start to look at each other, we start to engage with one another. Think about young people's movement and play. What are we learning when we're doing that? We're learning a whole range of social skills. So to think of movement as simply movement is a bit naive. Movement can be a doorway to a range of learning, but it's the way we present it, it's how we teach it, it's how we coach it. And I think we have a big job to do going forward to think differently, particularly for young people, about how we present this thing called movement. Whether that's physical education in the curriculum, whether it's sport, competitive sport, or whether it's pure physical activity. Are we really presenting it in a way that opens up these other intelligences? Or do we present it in a way which closes some of those intelligences down? And how do we help young people who are engaged in movement understand what they're learning through that movement? We're doing a whole range of programs where we're trying to help develop the characteristics of young people through movement. So I talked about emotional challenges. Resilience is really, really important in our young people. And in this country, we're watching a decline in youngsters' resilience, their ability to cope with stress and strain. The minute that happens, they fold. How do we build that back into their lives? We are working with our physical education teachers across the country to look at ways of how we use movement to draw out those other characteristics which help young people be successful in life. Whether that's resilience, working collaboratively with others, learning to interact with others effectively, making good decisions, all of those are part of what we do day in and day out. So when we talk about a child's right to move, we're talking about much more than physical movement. We're talking about a child's right to learn through moving. To learn through moving. And that's not just about learning movement. It's about learning about themselves. It's about learning about others. It's about thinking differently. Are we prepared to challenge the status quo, the way we teach in our schools, the way our coaches work, the way our leaders deliver physical activity? Are we prepared to think differently? Secondly, we need to think about the way we program what we offer young people. So quite often, we in the past, certainly here, have worked to a very traditional model of what we offer young people at certain stages of their development and certain contexts in which they operate. So if they're in schools, we offer them one thing. If they're in communities, we might offer them something quite different. But the reality is, we've got to think differently about what we program, how we program, and how we encourage young people to put physical activity into their daily lives. I don't know in your countries what physical education looks like. But in our country, physical education is a curriculum subject taught for an amount of time in the curriculum. That cannot be the only time that kids are physically active. How do we create active classrooms? Kids that stand while they're learning. Why do we have to sit and be quiet when we learn? Why can't we stand and be moving? Why can't we create an environment in our schools which really encourages consistently movement into daily lives? Why do we lock it away in things called sports clubs, physical education curriculum? If we are going to tackle that 1% that you're going to talk about this afternoon, we've got to build physical activity back in to everyday life. It can't be something that requires you to go to the gym, or goes to a sport club, or goes to a curriculum session. It's got to be something you do every day as part of your daily life, just like cleaning your teeth, hopefully. Not all our kids do that very well, but cleaning your teeth, getting dressed, physical activity should be such a natural part of life, and we've made it a specialist part of life. We've got to drag it back into being something we naturally do. You know, I'm a really busy person, as I'm sure everyone in this room is. It would be so easy for me to get in a car, to come here, to stand here, to get back in a car, to go back in the office, to go home. I build physical activity into every moment of my daily life. I work out how I can walk from A to B rather than jump on the bus or the tube. You've got to build it into your life. It isn't something you've got to go somewhere special to do. If we're going to change mindsets, we have to change our own provision. We have to think differently. And we have to create environments where movement is easy. not constrained environments. How many of you ride escalators when they're there? How many of you saw that wonderful experiment where they created the stairs and made it like piano rungs, and as you went up the stairs it sounded like a piano and everybody was dashing up and down the stairs to make tunes? We've got to make activity fun. It's got to be part of what we do. I don't think we've even begun to think broadly enough, creatively enough. We're very stuck with what we believe is the way we deliver this thing. And if we're going to get young people engaged in physical activity and sustaining that physical activity, then my goodness, we've got to change what we do. The third very simple message, so if my first one is that movement is about lots of intelligences, my second one is those of us who are creating environments and programs have got to think differently about how we build this into everyday life. My third message is with our experience at the Youth Sport Trust, and I'm sure yours, is the best people to get young people active are young people. Without any question, where we have had our greatest success at engaging the least active children has been when we've been able to inspire one of them to become the leader of the pack and help them get active. Whether that's primary age, or under 11, or whether it's secondary age, over 11, the peer leadership to try and get other young people active is key. We've done a whole range of work, whether it's been with disengaged girls, 11 to 14, where we've encouraged the leader of the girls group to come forward. It takes a little bit of confidence to do that, to be trained, to go back, confidence, going back into their schools, going back into their groups and getting young people active. Training young people from challenging inner city areas to be sports leaders. Training young people to be young coaches, young officials, young volunteers. All of that has to be a fundamental part of how we demonstrate to the youth of today, young people, that being active is something that they buy into, not that we think they should do. It's how do we present it in a way that they see it's cool, it's part of what young people do, it's not something we old folks tell them they ought to do, and that has to come from other young people. So that would be my third lesson from this morning. And my last one is this. We talk always about change, and I think change is relatively easy. You may not agree with me, but change is relatively easy, particularly if you've got money. You can change almost anything. I could change everybody in this room. If I said to you, the first person on the stage gets 500 quid, you kill each other to get up here. He's on his way up, that man there. You would though. But that's easy. But does that mean you'd always run? Or would you just run for the £500? So when we talk about change, particularly when we've got money, we've got programs, we've got investment, it's easy. That isn't the challenge. The challenge is how do we create transformation? How do we shift something? How do we shift mindsets, programs, environments, provision, so that we don't have to keep doing this? Because if we have to keep doing this and doing it, there'll be less of you each time, and the whole thing will slowly become something just a few eccentrics go on about. How do we create transformational change? So there's three things I think create transformational change. I think we're really good at the two on the right, all of us. We're really good at developing content, resources, material, equipment, gadgets. We're really good at that. I think we're pretty good at the middle one, which is we're really good at training tutors, training coaches, training teachers, training instructors. We do that. But we keep doing that over and over again. And we do it, and usually we've got enough money to do it for 3 years, and we do it for 3 years. And that money gets taken away, And then 3 years later, somebody invents it all over again, and we do it again. Because that's what happens. We used to have a campaign in this country called Sport for All. And I used to say it was followed by Exodus by many. Right? In other words, we'd have something going on, we'd invest lots of money, people come through the door, we'd do it, everybody's really excited about it. And then the money would go away, and everybody forget about it and disappear again. And if I was paid for every time I've come up with an idea, somebody said, oh yeah, we did that 10 years ago. Oh yeah, we did that 5 years ago. Why is that? Because we don't focus on this bit, structure. We cannot do enough on our own. Yeah, we can be real innovative creators of content. We can be really exciting people that train lots of people to be animated and motivated to change lives. We can do that. But it has to be hung on something. It's like the peg you put your coat on. You know? It's got to have structure. So this is just a simple example on here. The work we do around special educational needs for young people who have every right to have access to exactly the same opportunities as everyone else. Whether they have an emotional or mental disability or they have a physical disability, they have absolutely the same right. And we are really good at creating content. Accessible programs, thinking about how you adapt equipment and programs to include everybody. I bet there's people in this room equally brilliant at it. We've got better and better at training people to be inclusive in their thinking, to reach out, to make sure they can adapt their practice to include everybody. But what we've done is we've created a network of schools across the country who take responsibility for leading that. So while the Youth Sport Trust may help with content delivery and training and all of those other things, the people who own this will be there when we move on to something else. They have taken ownership of it. It's part of what they now do. It's transformation. So we work at this, we sustain that network, we support that network, but it's their program. That's what creates transformational change. Are we prepared to empower and enable others? Are we capable of thinking of the networks we need to pull together, whoever they are, to actually take ownership of this agenda and to drive it? It could be our schools, it could be our community providers, it could be the voluntary sector. But we, as providers, need to make sure that we've spent as much time on empowering and enabling them to understand what's needed and to create a collaborative structure of people. When these folks come together, people who run these schools, they have more ideas than we've ever had. They have shared practice. They understand what challenges they're all facing. That makes things transformational. Too often, we think delivering programs on the ground changes things. It probably does for a few moments of time in history. It doesn't transform things. If we're going to tackle this agenda, if we're really going to give young people of all levels of ability and disability the right to move, we've got to think about all three strands of that. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson we've learned in all the time that we've worked at the Youth Sport Trust. So in summary, you can put physical activity in the middle of this, you can put sport in the middle of this, I've put physical education in the middle of this. But the point I'm making here is if you put a child in the middle of this, so imagine a child sitting where it says HQPE, look what you give a child when you give it the right and the opportunity to move. Look what you give a child, way beyond the opportunity to move. You're taking care of their health and well-being, not just their physical health, their emotional health, their social health. If this is delivered well, if we're giving young people the right to move in the right way, we are affecting their health chances for the rest of their lives. We're affecting their emotional balance for the rest of their lives. We're affecting their ability to connect with other people for the rest of their lives. In terms of what we know about education, we know that through movement, we can develop these characteristics, these attributes that help kids be successful at work, in the workplace, and in their home lives, if we teach it well. Look at some of the words there. Employability, life skills. We talk about this all the time. Movement gives, it's like a doorway. If you imagine the young person sitting in the middle of there, they've got all these doors that they can go into, where they can develop well-being, achievement, and leadership. I do not doubt for one moment that you're here because you believe passionately in what I'm saying. But my challenge to you is, if we are going to change the status quo, we're going to have to be very brave, very bold, think very differently, empower young people, and create that transformational change by taking lots of people on this journey with us who don't just buy it, but can own it and deliver it. Thank you very much indeed.